This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. I'm coming at you Tuesday morning. It's May 21st. I haven't done a morning podcast in a while. It's Tuesday, so we're one day away from the Western Conference Finals between the Wolves and Mavericks at Target Center on Wednesday. I got Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick here with me from the Pioneer Press. I think the kind of plan today, Jace, is to start taking a first stab at this Wolves-Mavs series. If I'm being honest, or we were talking about before we hit record. I got home from Denver last night. I haven't had a ton of time to really dig into this Dallas matchup yet. I was thinking about how, with Phoenix and Denver, didn't really need that much time to think about it. They played Phoenix like twice in the last 5 games of the regular season. Denver, I feel like they played a third of their games against them over the last 2 seasons. So that was like kind of easy. We knew how the matchups all worked. We knew.
And we had a week in between the games anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think we'll both kind of take some more time today to look into it a little bit more. But yeah, we'll give our initial thoughts on this series.
Literally live thinking during the pod, like, oh, what about this? Oh yeah, sure.
No, I think that's actually kind of a good way to do it. And then I think Chris and I are going to do one tomorrow. Maybe we'll have. I'll probably try and watch one of the Wolves Mavs games from.
But they're not useful.
Season.
They're not useful. Like they were all pre-trade deadline.
Exactly. I mean, we're gonna go through that. I did what I did do was like look at least through those 4 games.
Which also, Luka and Kyrie played 1 together of those 4. Yeah, like
that's
it's not
the Wolves lost.
Yeah, right. But it was a collapse. Like they outplayed them for most of the game. But yeah, like there's
not a lot of we can run through all of those. But what I just before we kind of move on to the Western Conference Finals, me, Britt, and Kyle just kind of immediately jumped in and did a pod right afterwards. You were doing like actual reporter work after the game, and I think it's probably my favorite story that came out of post game of Game 7 was your story, kind of behind the scenes of what happened at halftime, because I know we were all thinking that like at halftime, like what the hell, this team looks so dead in the water, and then in hindsight, you look back at what they were able to do in the second half, which I think naturally led you to start thinking about what happened at halftime. So this whole thing turned around. You talked to Micah Nori, Elston Turner, and Finch, and a few of the players about what happened at halftime. But just for people who haven't read this, and you can read it in the Pioneer Press or TwinCities.com, what happened? What happened at halftime to kind of turn this thing around?
Yeah, and it wasn't like it was just listening to Finch post game, and he's like, "Oh, I was pissed about X, Y, and Z," and I was just like, I didn't think it was probably like some like legendary halftime thing or whatever, but I was just like, what does it look like? Just in general, when they play poorly at like what happens? Like what does he go do? And he talked about it. Yeah, Elston was walking down the hallway, and I was like, get a minute on this. And it's just they basically all were like. Finch is like, yeah, I mean, I get mad. I get mad. I say some things, but the biggest thing for them is like Finch basically said, like the most mad he gets is like when they're talking with the coaches in the film, like before he even goes and gives the message. Like that's when he is like, what is this? Like he's seeing the clips for the first time, even though he watched the game, and he's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? He's like, that's I think when more like the F-bombs are flying and whatnot. And then it's like, I think he kind of gathers his thoughts of like, how am I going to deliver this? And he walks into the locker room, and basically he's like, I just started like, we watched the clips. He's like, I angrily narrated all the clips, like that
was great.
What are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here? Offensively, basically, he's like, we just reverted back to all the terrible things we were doing from games 3 through 5 and didn't do anything we were doing in game 6. And he's like describing it back to me, and literally like he's getting to the point where he's like, I'm just like, what are we doing? Like to me. And I'm like, okay, so I don't know how loud this was to the players. And then, Mike Conley's like, oh yeah, he's sitting there with his crutch, like slamming it down, like mid-message and all that stuff. And like, just kind of
style.
Yeah. And I think Mike and Nori framed it best of like, it was like kind of an in-between of like, not just coming in and throwing stuff. Certainly wasn't doing that, like with his staff there. And then also just like, kind of just a message of like, this is disappointing. You know,
Mhm.
like you guys can
Well,
do better
didn't
than
Micah
this.
say like disappointed dad energy?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yes, yeah, 100%. You know, it was like, this is okay. You know, like we said, we're gonna do this and this, and if you're not going to, you're not gonna win. You know, like,
Mhm.
and that is like when there's a little bit of like a wake you up, and then like
Sure.
this is what it takes, and you guys aren't doing it. And Mike Conley was like, you know, we always take Finch's message, but when you see how bad he wants it, it does make you like,
Right.
yeah, okay, yeah, like we got to be better.
So at halftime at that game, like, I mean, we were sitting across the arena from each other, but I just like stayed at my seat and
Same.
I just was just watching through the offense. I'm like, what is going on? With this offense, and it just they weren't getting to anything effectively and all that. And what my initial reaction, always kind of like in the moment of that stuff, when I don't know, 10, 15 times during the regular season, the Wolves just had these like miraculously terrible stretches of offense that in many ways impacted how why this team was just an average offensive team during the regular season. But in those times, I was always like, it feels to me like it's coaching in those times when the offense just isn't working. And I think that's probably a lot of where people's minds go to, where it looks like they're not doing anything. Like, what are you trying to get to here? And that was like totally my energy at halftime of being like, well, you're just kind of like trusting it to get to the right spot, but the right spot is always ending up being like Rudy Gobert in the post or Jaden McDaniels in the corner. Credit to Jaden, he was hitting them, but it just didn't feel like they were running offense to get to the things that they know they need to get to have an effective offense in that Denver series. And reading your story back, I was thinking, how much of that is coaching? How much of it is it the execution of the players? And not having coached myself or anything like that, I don't really know how much of, whether it be the first half of Game 7 or the other times, during these playoffs or regular season, when the offense is terrible. Like, how much do you think about it as prescribing the blame to the way they're being coached versus the way they're executed? Because I think that's what you're kind of getting at in the story, or the coaches were.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is like, we saw what they did in Game 6 effectively, and the plan was to get to that same stuff. In Game 7, like, and then when the players go out and then they just don't, I think that comes down to like execution of players. But then I do think that's why, like, halftime, it's kind of like in like Game 7 at halftime, like it's your coach's last gasp, right? Like, this is it. Like, this is your last chance to make a real imprint on this game. Sure, you can say things at timeouts, rotations, whatever, but like imprinting the way your team is going to play, like you can do that pregame preparation, all that stuff. Halftime is your last chance to change it. And so it is like, okay, the plan is still to do what we did in Game 6. We did not do that. The plan is still now to do that. And here's like how we get that message across. And then we did see, I think just like in the second half, like it was like the ball was whipping around. And there was a lot of great passing. And Finch even said the first couple minutes where they got down 20, he was like, I wasn't worried about it because we were just missing shots. And I was like, that's why they didn't call timeout or anything. Like after Murray hit that three, it was like we were actually running offense and we were just missing a couple shots, and I had faith in what we were doing. And so I do think oftentimes like we can say like, what are they doing? Change it up. That I think the people's biggest complaint is like, if the players aren't executing your plan, like how do you spark it in game to like get them back on track versus being like, well, they're just not doing it right. And I do think there's some credence to that, like maybe a play call here or there gets things rolling, whatever. But you can also like at halftime just show them clips and be like, this isn't right. This isn't what we do, all that stuff. And they got him back on track through that method. So I do think part of coaching is like, look, sometimes your players are going to go out there and not do what you ask, and not execute to the way they're supposed to. So how do you get them back on track? And it took a while. It did take a half, but they managed to do that in their own way.
And Elston Turner, the Wolves defensive coordinator in the stories, said to you, like, Denver was doing a lot of good stuff defensively.
They were. Denver was
as well, and deserved the credit
in
there.
that first half, no doubt. I mean, like, I was watching. I might even tweeted it. I don't know, but I was like, and I said this to Elston. He's like, yes. I was like, they were playing Minnesota Timberwolves defense in the first half. They were. I mean, the rotations were so sharp, and you could see like they they clearly are not conditioned to do that for 48 minutes.
Right.
And that is what turned them in. But they played 24 minutes of incredible defensive basketball, and that matters too. So once Minnesota broke their spirit, now it becomes a little easier to run the offense you want to run. So that plays a role as well.
Yeah, it's just it's going to come up in this Western Conference Finals. Like kind of the same thing, whether it's just bogged down offense from the Wolves of their own doing, or I mean,
Dallas,
again, not that Dallas is playing good defense. That's what I was going to say.
Just when I watched the Thunder games, like you think like, and they did. Denver loaded up on Ant. Like Dallas packed it in against Shea. I mean, they packed. It was almost like everybody had a foot in the paint, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, in some moments, and like obviously that shines a light on Josh Giddey, but like the same light will be shed on Jaden McDaniels and guys like that. Like, got to hit shots.
Oh, absolutely. Like I was at a bachelor party. I told you about this in Denver the night before the Wolves game, and it was my cousin's bachelor party, and so like some of his friends, they were watching it. They're doing like the sports betting, whatever. And I was like, man, I would. This ended up being wrong, but I was like, I would take like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander like under on points for everything, because I had been watching Dallas in particular, like with a lens on Shea, thinking about Ant, and it was so clear watching how Dallas was guarding OKC, was just like trying to take away those driving lanes. And it was interesting, like Shea's adjustment, and why he was like so great in at least the first half of that game 6, the final game of that series, was he just kind of had to start pulling up short and like taking those 14-foot shots, because Dallas was like, we are blocking this off here, like extended restricted area sort of circle, like, and then so Shea was just kind of getting to like that 14-foot area and hitting it over and over again. Dallas, that's what, as I understand Dallas, like that's what they're going to do defensively, is choose and focus on an area of something to stop, and then kind of play off of that and scramble behind it. And again, in the ways that Denver did in game 7 against the Wolves. But yeah, this is going to be another challenge for the Wolves offense from an execution standpoint, from the players, I think from the coaching staff, of like, okay, Dallas is doing this. What are we scripting, structuring, so as to when we can't get it in the flow, what are you going to get offensively there? And to me, that's going to answer a lot in this series, is what can the Wolves do offensively? Because we can't talk about Luka and Kyrie, and there's a huge defensive task at hand in this series. But you kind of know, like, the Wolves have defensive personnel to kind of play with that, maybe slow that down a little bit. Are you with me? Is it just offense where you start thinking about this Wolves Mavs series?
Yeah, for sure, because we all know it's really hard to play defense if you're not scoring. It's because then now you're having to get back your cross matches, all that stuff. Like, it played out a lot in the Denver series. Like, that was a series of runs, because it was like whoever was getting stops was probably scoring the other way at a much higher rate. And then getting to go back and set their defense. That's why like two really good teams were just blowing one another out, because like if you were getting stops, then you were going against cross match defense, and you were scoring, and so then you were getting back again and getting to set your really good defense up. And it just builds. It's an avalanche. So yeah, like it is like if Minnesota can score, then Minnesota's defense is greater, and then that leads to stops. So it definitely kind of compounds on each other. So it does all start offensively.
I really think so. And to, like you said before, they had a week before the Phoenix series. They had time, in the midst of the Denver series, to really kind of implement specific coaching things. And that's just not going to happen in the series. You start on Wednesday, and it's Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday. Like it's every other day the whole time. So there's not going to be that 3-4 day stretch to be able to really dig in and hyper focus in on coaching and practicing and all those sort of things that has really benefited this team in the playoffs and during the regular season. Like when they would have a couple days off, they would come out and play and execute at a really high level. So I think a huge key in this series is having the offense ready to go, knowing what you want your offensive identity to be, what you're trying to get to in this series. I, again, need to look at it, think about it, like what for me those areas to kind of poke at or focus on are, but that's critical. I'm just thinking about this, a lot of this series being the Wolves offense versus Dallas's defense.
Yeah, and Dallas's defense, like, it just doesn't have the same reputation of being like great, but they have been really good. Like, I haven't looked.
And 2 years ago when they went to the Western Conference Finals, they
Yes.
were great defense.
They often do, and this is just totally a shout out to a St. Paul guy, like, so
Yeah.
very very easy for me to get there. But like, it seems like for the past few years, Dallas was like, what's the worst defensive personnel we can give Sean Sweeney and be league average? And now at the trade deadline, like I did not think PJ Washington was a good defender because we had just watched Cat get 62 on him in Charlotte, and the only reason he didn't get 70 is because eventually they put Miles Bridges on him instead, who got more physical than PJ Washington was willing to. But so I was like, and then Gafford's not, like, he's an okay guy at the rim, but like, you get guys from Charlotte and Washington, you don't think it's going to be some big sell for your defense, but they have found a way to make those pieces work, as Sean Sweeney often does. And that's why, like, they've been really good defensively. They were great defensively against the Thunder. They'll probably be, and that'll be something where, like, I won't be surprised at all to see them throw multiple different looks at Minnesota throughout the series, because it will be a big chess match on that end. Like, Dallas's defense since that trade has been quite good. And it's been a big reason for this team, like, getting to this point and looking at the end of the regular season like a team that could get to this point.
Absolutely. The engagement level is just up. And, I didn't watch every one of the Mavs Thunder series, but Kyrie really stood out to me as just like effort and focus on that side
battling
of it. And, yeah. Like, and that's, as we kind of know, like with the Wolves too, not that, Cat and Ant are terrible defenders or anything, but they're the weaker points of the Wolves defense. If you line it up, maybe throw Nas in there too.
Yeah, but at least in terms of team defense, like, obviously we know Ant 1-on-1 is maybe one of the better, harder guys scoring in the NBA.
But it's just like when you see the engagement of Ant, like, that pops, right? And there's a whole that it levels this team up. And then, I mean, Cat and Nas might be even better examples given what they did, guarding Durant and Jokic in the series. Obviously more Cat there than Nas, but all three of those guys, who I think in their pecking order of skill sets are offense first, defense second, they were engaged the whole time. And I think from when I watched Dallas in round two, I saw that from the Kyries, the PJ Washingtons, the Luka Doncic's, who are more so that way. I want to jump into just kind of running through what the 4 games were for the Wolves. Let me grab our first break here. I want to let everyone know that we are doing another live show at Falling Knife Brewing Company this Thursday, which is after, so it's between game 1 and game 2. We'll be back at Falling Knife, kind of doing the same thing. We'll do an outdoor show, 6 p.m. Kind of come get a seat, hang out, happy hour, and then we will do the live show at 7. So if you were there, I guess what was that, a week ago, I don't know, it all blurs together. We had a lot of fun. Alex Rodriguez came to the next one. I know in the video he's there. Don't be certain that Alex Rodriguez is going to come to this, but it's,
you're not ruling it out.
I haven't talked to him, but I'm not. You're right, I'm not. But I am just excited to kind of get together with everybody again, and this has been obviously a really fun vibe for the city, and this has kind of been my touch point for it, is these live events. So again, that's Falling Knife this Thursday, 6 p.m. happy hour, 7 p.m. live show. It's in Northeast Minneapolis. And then today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, and we got a new series. So we got new numbers set for daily fantasy lineups at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. Just kind of looking at Ants here. His numbers are set more or less than 28 points, more or less than 5.5 rebounds, more or less than 6 assists. Obviously they got tons of these on here. All the Wolves players, you can kind of take a look at it. If you have a feel for, how you think the Wolves are going to be able to match up, what advantages they're going to take here, what disadvantages they might have, or if you think Luka's going to have a big series, Kyrie, PJ Washington, whatever, you can kind of put together a daily fantasy lineup accordingly. I think these ones are particularly fun to do. Maybe kind of jump on the player that you think is going to have success in this series in game 1 before kind of the numbers have shifted there. So take a look at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app to submit a daily fantasy lineup for game 1 on Wednesday. And if you are not yet a Prize Picks user, use the promo code Dane for a $100 sign up bonus. All right, Jace. As you said right at the top, these 4 games aren't that useful that the Wolves played. But I know.
Quickly, I'll just check out while you run through them.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Just like everybody else, we are killing time. The first game that these two teams met was December 14th. The Wolves win 119-101. It was in Dallas. The Wolves were completely healthy. The Mavs had no Kyrie in that game. Again, Wolves win by 18 there. Ant, complete dud of a game. 9 points, 3 of 19 shooting. He was 3 of 16 from 2. It was just a not very competitive game, and Ant was kind of one of those downshift games from Ant. Nas was the leading scorer in that game. I had 27 points with 7 for 11 from 3. Game 2 was 2 weeks after that. It was December 28th. It was right when the Wolves were it was a win. It was another win, but it was right when they were getting in that post-Christmas kind of weird phase they had for a few weeks. They did win that game, though. That was at Target Center. The Wolves, again, were completely healthy. And the Mavs, again, had no Kyrie and no Luka in that game. Ant goes off for 44 points, 6 for 11 from 3. It was a big Rudy game. He didn't miss a shot. He had 20 and 11. And in that one, Cat kind of struggled a little bit. But those are the first two, 2-0 for the Wolves. The third game is January 7th. So, again, about 2 weeks after that game. And the Wolves lose 115-108 at Dallas. Again, the Wolves are healthy. The Mavs have both Kyrie and Luka. The only guy they were missing in that game was Derek Lively, which is an important piece there. For the Wolves in that game 3, it was another big game for Ant. He had 36 points, 3 of 6 from 3, 11 for 21 from 2. Real heavy. That was when Ant was in his aggressive stages of like, I'm getting doubled while I'm still shooting through it. That was a game of him being aggressive, shooting through it, and finding success. McDaniels really struggled in that game, which I think is noteworthy. It was because it was a Kyrie and Luka, the one Kyrie and Luka game that they both played in. Luka had 34 in that one. Kyrie had 35. They combined to go 11 of 20 from 3. I think that's the most relevant game in this whole thing because both Luka and Kyrie played in it, and because game 4 was a big old nothing. January 31st, Wolves win by 34 points at Target Center. Again, the Wolves are healthy, and the Mavs have no Kyrie, no Luka, and no Derek Lively, and no Derek Jones Jr.
They face guarded Tim Hardaway the whole game. That was who Dallas had on the team. They face guarded Tim Hardaway that whole game.
And Hardaway, I'm not trying to remember. Hardaway had one really big game
right before that.
That was the third game that Hardaway. So that's what they were. No, it was the other Luka Kyrie game that Hardaway had like 35.
And like earlier that week before that game where they face guarded, like Hardaway had a big game against whoever Dallas played, and then the Wolves just face guarded him because literally nobody else for Dallas was like, we weren't talking too many NBA players at that point. It was an absolute. I mean the starters in that game were Tim Hardaway, Jaden Hardy, Rashawn Holmes, Josh Green, and Grant Williams. I mean, that's the funny thing is I'm looking through all these. Grant Williams played in all 4 games because they all came before the trade deadline. That's one thing that we could talk about. I remember after they lost that game in Dallas, I was like, yeah, it's still kind of hard for Minnesota to defend small ball. Like you said, Lively didn't play. They didn't have Gafford yet. They went really small. They didn't really have a choice to do anything but that. And I do wonder, like, do we think? I don't think it will go that way, but that is certainly still a lever that Dallas could pull. Like, do you think they go there? I really doubt it's plan A by any way, shape, or form.
I put that down in my notes as like a question mark, but then under that I have, now they have Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford.
Right. Like two of your best 7 players. So you're not removing both from the equation, I don't think.
Right. And I guess want to look from the Dallas OKC series of like how many minutes they played without either of them on the floor. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would imagine, given how helpful Gafford has been for them, Dallas has benefited by becoming a team that does stay big at all times. And basically what Gafford allows them to do is have 48 minutes of Lively, And actually, Gafford sort of starts, but it's that same sort of similar type of players. So I just, not even just this season, but last season too, Dallas was one of the most willing teams to go small against the Rudy lineups.
Right.
Grant Williams on him or whatever, or I don't even know, like Kleba a year ago. And I remember that like hurting the Wolves.
Who's only, I mean, I don't think he's going to play game one.
Yeah, right. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking.
I think it was part of like old Dallas's plan or pre-trade deadlines plan against the Wolves. If they didn't go out and make the Washington and Gafford acquisitions, then I think, yeah, we would have seen that as a lever they would have pulled. But I'm not. I don't know. I obviously could be wrong there, but I'm not really expecting them to go really small there, unless it's maybe a break glass in case of emergency sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think like maybe if they lost game one, down in game two, maybe you're just like, let's just try it and see how it looks, because you can go obviously like Luka, Kyrie, Derek Jones, PJ Washington, Tim Hardaway, and then I think Kleba probably maybe returns at some point in the series. He's out right now and he's not practicing.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing like treadmill stuff yesterday. So I don't really think he's an option for them right now. Maybe that changes as the series goes along. And then that's a little bit of like a kind of in betweener, because Kleba is a power forward. So like, you could move him to the 5 and be like, we're kind of small, but we have shooting.
Right.
But until then, frankly, I don't expect that. It's just something that they could go to, which is always like, if you go to it, then things probably aren't going very well.
Yeah. And I think it's becoming an open question of whether or not that's even a good idea against these Wolves. The Wolves are doing a way better job of imposing that size and not having it hurt them.
It really just seems like a great way to allow Minnesota to get into the bonus, because it literally is like Rudy goes down there and then the small guys are like, all right, I got to be really physical here. But then they just get really grabby. And it's like, even if it's, early in the second quarter or whatever, it doesn't feel like something that's really happening. It's like, yeah, Minnesota didn't score, but you went from 1 team foul to 4, and now Minnesota's in the bonus the rest of the way. So Ant might shoot 6 free throws the rest of this quarter, stuff like that. So I totally agree that it's not like the one time that Rudy gets it down there, doesn't score, doesn't counteract you putting yourself in the bonus and having to defend differently for the final 9 minutes of any quarter.
Yeah, it's been profitable for the Wolves in these playoffs when teams, Phoenix, in particular, or Denver, when they didn't have Jokic on the floor, when Rudy played against small ball offensively, like the Wolves went to him and he got fouled a bunch. And to Rudy's credit, it worked because Rudy made the free throws. In that series. I think all these playoffs. I don't know exactly what he's shooting, but I'd assume it's over
plenty good enough.
Right? Yeah, like not to the point where it's any sort of real major concern. So yeah, I've kind of gotten to the point where the smaller teams go, the more I'm looking at that to be a real opportunity for the Wolves rather than something that they have to survive, or something like the Nuggets need to survive the non-Jokic minutes or whatever it might be. I think it can be advantageous. Let's talk a little bit about the matchups. I looked at the game they lost, right, is the most instructive, because that's when Kyrie and Luka played, and how the Wolves matched up in that one was Gobert on Powell. Again, Lively didn't play that game. So I think we know Gobert is going to guard, a Gafford to start the game, Lively when he's in there. Cat guarded Derek Jones Jr. McDaniels guarded Luka. Ant guarded Kyrie, and Conley guarded Josh Green in that game. And on the other side, the Dallas center guarded Gobert. Derek Jones Jr. guarded Ant. That's a huge part of this series. How they don't have a lot of options for Ant. Derek Jones Jr. has
been really good.
Yeah. And he's their Jaden McDaniels, right? Yep. Put him on the point of attack. Josh Green guarded Conley. Luka guarded Cat. Remember that? Like, it was kind of
vaguely.
It was just they're like, we're just going to be big, like just have Luka kind of try to be a wall here.
Yep.
In the pipe. Again, I haven't gone back to watch it, but I do remember that. Somewhere I was remembering when I was looking at these notes. And then they put Kyrie on Jaden. So kind of in the dare again, which Jaden has handled well in the games they've won and struggled with in the games they lost. Again, he's going to be a barometer, an X factor. His offense will be because they need him not only to guard Luka, but they need him to also not hurt them offensively. And I think, right, our belief in Jaden's ability to go against that has grown a lot. I think in these playoffs, particularly in what he was able to do in Game 7. I think there it's always kind of about foul trouble and how many he's picking up. Is he able to stay on the floor, stay in a rhythm, stay engaged, all those sort of things. Of those matchups, which one of those intrigues you most?
I just don't even know if that's how they'll match up.
That's fair.
Yeah, just because PJ Washington's out there, like, so I don't know if they'll go like PJ Washington on Cat, like, which, I mean, I just watched PJ Washington guard Cat a couple months ago. I don't think I would go to that. But
that is the change in the lineup. Is that was Josh Green on Conley?
Yeah, and PJ Washington's not going to guard Conley. I don't.
Yeah, so
I would be very surprised by that. But then I don't know who does guard Conley. Like, do they just put Luka on Jaden because Luka's going to have to work hard offensively in this series? So, like, and then maybe PJ Washington does guard Cat, and it's at least with help defense, which Charlotte did not believe in. That type of thing. Like, that's how I would probably guess it's going to go, is Derek Jones Jr. on Ant, Gafford on Rudy, PJ Washington on Cat, and then maybe Luka on Jaden and Kyrie on Conley, or flip those two. It doesn't really matter.
I think Kyrie on Conley, and even again, like we said, you would see him more out of Kyrie. I'm trying to think of how often. I mean, what's interesting is they like to put Derek Jones Jr. at the point of attack, and they will when it's Ant. But a lot of the time, we know that goes kind of both ways with the Wolves, where it's often, Conley initiating. So I think if you're Dallas, you got to be thinking about, do we want Kyrie to need to navigate, 18 Conley Gobert screens a game? I think it seems kind of like a hiding spot in that it's Mike and he's not physically imposing, but it's a physically imposing job because you're getting cracked by Rudy, 15 times a game.
Well, that is another option for them, is that they could go back to the Luka on Cat thing, and like Luka is, at least push you. Like he'll like compete, like, and they'd obviously, I'm sure, like have, Gafford or Lively played a lot, like in Game 6. I kind of think they're kind of at a point where like Gafford starts, but Lively's plays more minutes. And he's a really good defensive player, especially for a rookie. So you could do Luka on Cat, and then you could put PJ Washington on Conley, and maybe put some length on that. Actually does tend to bother Mike a little bit.
Yeah, no, that would make some sense there. I think, I mean, a lot of it has to come down with like how much of a threat are you treating Cat like after what you saw in the first two series. I mean, both teams pretty willingly did not prioritize, Phoenix and Denver did not prioritize that matchup defensively, at least to like the nth degree. They willingly switched Jamal Murray onto Cat over and over again in Game 7. In the Phoenix series too, it didn't seem like Cat was much of a defensive priority for them, obviously, because they were prioritizing Ant in the defensive look they were going to. I think, again, it'll be true that Cat needs to get going so as to loosen up the offense, to get Ant and everyone else sort of involved. And we have to feel better about Cat's ability to be able to do that. And I think in pretty much whoever they put on him, if it's Luka or PJ Washington, like it is going to be a lesser primary defender. It's not going to be Aaron Gordon, it's not going to be Kevin Durant. Cat is going to have an easier defensive or an easier offensive matchup than he did in round 1 or round 2. And he's going to have a way easier defensive matchup, I think, as well. That's what's interesting. This is a series where you dial up Cat. What do you think?
That's what's interesting to me. And like, I think having those primary defensive matchups where he knew this is the most important thing I'm doing on the court right now is guarding Nikola Jokic, is guarding Kevin Durant. I think that freed him up offensively. Like my main job out here is to defend. And then everything I get offensively, like I'll be aggressive and stuff. But like, if you're missing shots, you're like, I'm still out here to defend. Like I really do think that put him in a really great frame of mind. Like this is what I'm out here doing. Even the nights when he didn't shoot well, like Game 6 or whatever, like, okay, but I'm guarding Jokic, and that is my primary responsibility, and that's what I'm needed to do. Where now, like defensively, it'll be like, hey, don't get lost off ball, that kind of stuff, because it's just not like a heavy a heavy offensive matchup, like defensive matchup for him to take on. So
Can't
like
be like Luca, and I got to do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Like,
exactly right. So like, so when you don't have to be as and everybody has to be locked in on team defense, but when it's not like right in front of you, when you're not in the play all the time, like, do you stay in that same frame of mind where you're like, okay, defense is most important, and
yeah.
offensively, like whatever I get here, like I just got to keep locking in defensively, like because we've seen it with Ant, like. When you don't have a primary matchup, it's easy to get lost and play worse team defense. So that'll be a different challenge for him.
I think this is a really good point. Like, I think a big part of the reason that Carl had the success that he did was because there wasn't a high offensive expectation. It was he had like pretty simple deliverables. And I still, before you just said that, I still stick with what I believe, which is I think Carl does still need to be able to do those things
Yep.
in this series. But yeah, because during the regular season, what were the bad Cat games? The Kings, the teams like that, where Cat had to really chase a four around and not be guarding a big or not be guarding just a guy in straight isolation. So I guess just my initial thought was like, okay, no KD, no Jokic, like easier defensive series for Cat, but maybe part of what we
they
have
can
learned
compromise
is
him more. Yeah,
yeah,
the things that are just like your body, like the things that Cat is
right,
unfairly asked to do. Like we talk about, it's unfair to have to guard Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, but at least like they're doing things that isn't like you running around screens on the perimeter, all this type of stuff. Like
right.
whatever, like, okay, help in, chase out to the corner, like stuff that he can do and he's gotten better at. But it is the stuff that like that's not your strength and it's not your fault. That's not your strength. It's just that's kind of things we have to work around. So that is different. And then like also like they will need help, I think, on Cat, even if it's PJ Washington, Luka Doncic, whoever. The interesting thing about this series for Cat is that Dallas has more rim protection than either of the first two opponents did. Like Yusuf Nurkic and Nikola Jokic, not rim protectors in the way that especially like a Lively is, or even Gafford, like they're just more comfortable being those guys.
That's a great point. Yeah, I thought that was one of the most interesting things about rounds 1 and round 2 was that if Ant could beat the gap help problem, the rim was there. I mean, and Ant said it. What was that game? No, game 2, when they blew him out, he was like, yeah, like 13 points in the first 3 minutes, and he was like, these were the easiest buckets I scored all season. He said that post game after that one, and it is going to be a different challenge for both Ant and Cat and Nas, the guys who like to get downhill, beat their first guy off the bounce, but then have that rotating guy come over. I think this is a big. I thought last series, the first 2 series were both really important to find Rudy on the roll because Phoenix and Denver were just bringing Nurkic and Jokic like up to the level and letting Rudy roll there. And so that's what I was hitting over and over again. Got to hit him on the roll. Got to hit him on the roll. I think this one is more so like once Lively or Gafford disengage from Rudy to defend the rim, it's got to be a Rudy lob.
Yeah, or an offensive rebound. I mean, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
There's still low-hanging fruit on that, man.
Yeah.
Like
we've seen it. Just put it on the rim. If you draw 2 at the rim, put it up there, and Rudy can swallow up the offensive rebound. Like, because even if Dallas does everything right and the guy coming down from the corner is trying to check Rudy on the glass, or like the trailing on ball guy is like leaking off to try to body up Rudy, like that's really hard to do when Rudy puts his mind to it. So I do think it might be one of those things where Rudy needs 8 second chance points, like one of those types of things.
Yeah, and that's always the question with Rudy, right? Is like, how do you involve him offensively in the ways that help and try to avoid as much as possible the ways that potentially, hurt? And that always kind of requires figuring out or just learning kind of in game 1 or even first quarter of game 1, how are they going to guard this? What, like, we know this team is going to be loaded up on Ant. Maybe is going to be loaded on Cat, doubling on that. So there's going to be obvious release points in this. And the Wolves need to find that and be able to, it doesn't need to be like the mainstay of their offense of like Jaden in the corner for the 3. But if they're doubling Cat from the top, we know how that works. Swing, and it's to Jaden there. Or if they're loaded on Ant, it's okay. How do we get Ant off it and back to the second side so we can attack one guy rather than that? Like, But you don't know that really coming in. And I think that's for the Wolves coaching staff, because you didn't play this team in game 82, because you haven't played them 20 times like they have played the Nuggets in the past 2 years. I'm not sure they know what to expect going into this from a matchup. Or
and like we said, this is a different Dallas roster. Like, I don't know if either team knows what the other you might do. Like, well, here's what they did with Ant, and here in Dallas is thinking, here's what they did with Kyrie and Luka. You know, like we know that kind of stuff. But just as far as like the general team and what they're willing to let go, like it's going to be kind of blank slates for both teams. Like, that's why game one's going to be interesting. And then like, okay, here's what's on the table. Now what game two? I know Dallas fans are like, we always lose game one of every series. Jason gets a terrible game one coach, great game two, you know, like whatever. So that'll be interesting to track too. Like I am very interested. Like game one, my biggest thing that I will look at is, can Derek Jones make things hard for Ant by himself? Because the fact that Denver did not have anybody who could do that really did change everything for everyone for Minnesota, because they had to load up so much that, like, we saw it, like, even when it was Jamal Murray, they didn't want to help off Cat because they didn't want rotation, like Ant getting the ball in rotation where they weren't set. You know, it was like, nope, we can't let this guy have any easy buckets. Like when they finally started doubling Cat in game 7, it was when Ant wasn't on the court. So like that is what's going to be interesting, is like, can Derek Jones Jr., they don't think they can shut off Ant's water, you know, but like, can it be like, okay, this might be a 45% shooting 28-point game for you, because we can live with that. Right. But if Ant can just like blow by and kind of make mincemeat out of Derek Jones Jr. and they have to adapt, that's what it really opens everything up for everyone else.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Like, you can't both guard Ant the way that Ant has been guarded in these playoffs and double Cat.
Yeah, it's too hard.
Right?
You can't, you know.
It's and that's a good thing to highlight with that when they did double Cat. Remember, that turnover was that third quarter or whatever.
KCP tipped it. Yeah,
and I was like, whoa, like a Cat double, like, which used to be the norm, but there was so few of those. But you're right, that was with him off the floor. So again, like, this kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, offensively, if you're the coaching staff, what are you hitting? You know, what are you hitting as so as to play off of the way in which they're guarding him? But I think you're right with Derek Jones Jr. in assuming that they probably start by trying to trust that a lot, you know, and
with their rim protection help and everything. It's like, we can make it hard enough, you know?
Yeah. Maybe you don't need double gap help if you have Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford at the rim there.
So what's the plan straight up? You know, like, what's the Wolves' plan if Dallas goes straight up, which I think they might just start, like you said, you know?
Yeah. I mean, then it's like, let's go Ant, you know, like, and that can just be like straight from the top, you know, and then Ant's like, so much of like putting two on the ball with him is like Ant kind of retreating and getting off of it. Right. I think whenever he's guarded straight up, it's more about getting into that like 16, 17 foot range and making passing decisions when you're already going downhill. That's where you find the skip passes in the corner. That's where you get to your pull up in rhythm. I think if we're right in assuming they're going to kind of guard that a little bit more honestly with Derek Jones Jr., then it becomes a lot of like first quarter Ant. Can you be effective getting there into the middle of the floor without getting stripped, finding your offense and finding others? The less attention you put on Ant, the more the Wolves put on Ant, right? You know what I'm saying? And that seems like dangerous, but part of it is Ant is still 22. And he really knew and understood what the looks were that he was getting defensively. Is he going to know and understand that immediately in the Dallas game? And I think the answer to that is probably no, because you used to pre-script it out, right?
Like, and he's been getting like, you know, like the two on the ball, like he's been awesome at getting off the ball. That's all he's seen for like a month now. I mean, like the playoffs been going for a month, and that's all he's seen. So a different look is going to be like require somewhat of an adjustment, you know, like, and so that will be a little bit of figuring out, like, again, getting back to like, okay, now I have to be more aggressive, but what's the right balance? You know, like that will be something that maybe it takes a game, maybe it takes 2 games, whatever, like, and they can win as he works through that anyway, you know, like we've seen they can win in multiple different ways. But yeah, that'll be a little bit of him, like a game within a game, just for him, of like, how do I attack this? when do I make sure to get out the ball? When do I just turn the corner and try to get to the rim and go at Derek Lively and know if I either score or get fouled or maybe Rudy gets, a putback, whatever. Like he'll find his way. It's just, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes. And then once he does, how does Dallas adjust? Like it's the fun part of all these series, right? Like seeing the back and forths. But you have to figure out what the other opponent is doing first and find a solution for that first before any other adjustments are made.
I think, Jason, what we know now is Ant will listen.
Yeah. Yep.
Like that's huge. I would have said that a month ago. Like, I mean, that was one of my big things I was trying to hammer home after, game 7 was they did fall back they're down by 20 early in the third quarter, and Ant did not just choose to put it all in his backpack and try and figure it out on his own.
Yep. That was awesome.
And then, he's special. So could have that worked, if Ant just tried to take over in the third quarter? I'm not saying that's a 0% chance, but I think we kind of know what that looks like a lot of the times when teams are loaded up against Ant and he tries to take over. It's turnovers, right? To Ant's credit, I mean, it's we've been talking about this, since before the Phoenix series. This was the biggest question I had about the Wolves ceiling was Ant's willingness to play offense this way, the right way, to get off of it when they're putting 2 on him, to understand how he fits into the greater context of the Wolves. And he's done that in the first 2 series. The difference is, I think what we're assuming is the defensive look they put against him might be a little bit different.
Hold on. I just wanted to hat tip Ant one more time. Cause I know, I wrote about, this was about, right after the game, this is about everybody, and I thoroughly believe that. Cap put forth one of the best performances of his career, maybe the best given the stage. Jay McDaniels, awesome. Mike Conley, much better second half. Rudy Nas, obviously that burst, but Ant was awesome for having a 6 for 24 game. For all the reasons you said, continuing to make the right play. I think he had 8 rebounds in the second half. He defended his butt off and just took basically made Jamal Murray not want the ball for, I think, large portions of that second half.
Takes out Michael Porter Jr. because Jaden's on Michael Porter Jr.
And Jokic is just standing there with the ball up top. Are we going to run dribble handoff? And Murray's like, I'm going to hang out over here 10 feet away.
He's I'm top locked.
That's the impact that Ant had. That is the ultimate sign of a winner to me. Didn't have it. Denver was trying to take him away. Yeah, put up a few shots, trying to get himself going, but not an exorbitant amount by any stretch. I didn't think, and just found so many other ways to have not just an impact, but a big impact without scoring. I thought that was awesome, and like you said, to do that when you're down 20 is really hard. It's easy to do when you're up 5, but when you're up down 20, to continue to just play the right way and find different ways to bring your team back into it, that was fantastic.
Absolutely. He deserves credit for that. Yeah, like you said, he played as well as he could for a 6 for 24 game. Now that part's disappointing, and I don't think they're going to win very many games if Ant shoots 6 for 24 in this series, but they found a way through kind of sticking with it. Last thing, let's talk about the Kyrie and Luka matchups. I think we know or assume that this is going to be a Jaden back on the point of attack series, probably on Luka, right? And a lot, which I think kind of helped him in the other series of being off ball a little bit more, a little less foul trouble. Maybe because of that, he's going to be on Luka. It's one of the toughest matchups to not get in foul trouble against, I think, as a defender there. Obviously, they have Ant too to put on Kyrie, probably. Maybe Mike can do a little bit of that, but I think it probably starts right with Jaden and Ant on those two, and then you get into your bench with Nickeil, and then probably Kyle Anderson, right, has been part of the Luka answer defensively for the last 2 seasons. Are those kind of the 4 guys you're anticipating taking those 2 jobs?
Yeah, I can't see anybody else doing it, frankly. Will Mike be on Kyrie sometimes? Just
sure,
depending on a lineup or whatever, maybe. But as far as Luka, for sure, those 4, and then largely on Kyrie as well. It'll be interesting. If there's a Mike and Kyle out there, which one's on Kyrie, I don't know. Or maybe Kyle goes on Luka and one of the other guys goes on Kyrie. But yeah, I mean, this is why you want to have so many good perimeter defenders. Is a team like this, you can still go, okay, we can still match up. Right. I'm interested to see if Minnesota really puts a lot of attention on Luka, how comfortable, how often does Kyrie go, okay, this is me. And also Kyrie plays off the ball a lot, but he's also a huge name. So how much Ant locks in off the ball when it's Kyrie Irving off the ball. That'll be really
Sure.
interesting too.
Yeah, because Ant will guard Kyrie Irving on the ball,
Yeah.
and like if there's one-on-one like that. Yeah, that's and I think that was part of the Jamal Murray idea of like why they put Ant on Jamal Murray is in 4 years now, we know it is so obvious that Ant's engagement on the defensive side of the floor triples when he's guarding the point of attack. And, and sometimes he gets tired from doing that. He's hitting screens. You probably can't do that for 48 minutes. He loses focus when he's not on the ball and he's just kind of like guarded the guy. Then that's where his guy just trickles behind for a backdoor for him. And he's like, I wasn't there. Like that was a good move in the Denver series by the Wolves coaching staff that I did not anticipate, was putting Ant there so as to engage him defensively. And that's why I would assume he is on Kyrie, but you're right to say that like Kyrie is not Jamal Murray in this matchup because Luka is going to initiate 65% of the possession, more than that maybe.
Kyrie's great off the ball. He's been great off the ball for Dallas. Like, that's ways to get open.
And so I don't know, to that end, like Jaden and Nickeil are a little bit better off ball and slithering around pin downs and that sort of thing. Do you go at times Ant on Luka then so as to put the better chasers on Kyrie and Jaden and Nickeil? I think the Kyle Anderson part's interesting. Because I do think Jaden will get in foul trouble in this series. And if Jaden is in foul trouble, who else do you have to put on Luka? I don't think that's a Nickeil job. Like Ant, maybe. But I think maybe you see a lot of Kyle Anderson in this. And again, Kyle's weirdly really good at that. But you have the recourse on the offensive side of the floor of being able to survive in offensive possession when both Kyle and Rudy are out there. And that means just your spacing is gone. Mm-hmm. I remember I was just rewatching the game yesterday and they kind of survived that in game 7 with Rudy and Kyle and that second quarter stretch when Kyle came in for Ant. But we do know what that story has mostly looked like this season. When Kyle's out there with Rudy, particularly if he's out there with Rudy and Jaden, it is like, I don't know. I don't know how this Wolves team's going to be able to score, but I think as weird as that sounds to go down to the 9th man or whatever, or 8th man for the Wolves, that might be important because I think he's part of the Luka answer.
Yeah, for sure. I am interested to see how often, or like if Luka gets going, like how quick they maybe are to even then move Ant onto Luka. And part of the equation is like Ant on the ball more. It was almost easier to do it against Denver because like Ant was on the ball against Denver, but with the way Denver was playing, it was like, all right, get off of it. Come down, get off of it.
Or Gordon's initiating this time.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So like, but now like if Ant is asked to carry a heavier load, if Dallas does have to play straight up and Ant has to be the one to make them pay for that, then you're less likely probably to want Ant on the ball, like busting his butt defensively. But like it is like Luka, somebody you want to throw different looks at. And I know that'll be a big thing with like Rudy, like, hey, is he at the level? Like we've seen him do against Luka sometimes in the past, or is he in drop? Like, so that'll be an interesting part of the defense as well.
He's normally up. He's normally up.
Yeah. That's something that they have adjusted to really over the last couple of years. They started doing that a lot more. And then, but like just Ant is so different than Jaden that like that's another way to just give a guy a different look. Where like Jaden, you maybe can get to where you want to get to, but you're not sure still if you shoot it, if he's just gonna block it. Ant is like the most frustrating guy I think to ever go against because these guys are not used to not getting to their spots. And Ant's like, you're not getting right there. I'm gonna cut you off from getting there, and you're like, I can't get through you. So I think he can be even more frustrating to go against, but I just think mixing between those two can really keep somebody from ever actually getting into a rhythm.
No, that's a good point. Is there anything else? I mean, we're about to go to practice after this, and maybe from talking to Finch and some of the players, get a couple other, top line items for the series. Anything else?
They never actually tell us. They never actually tell us what they're going to do. So it's.
Yeah, but you'll be able to write a story off of it, and I'll be able to use some clips tomorrow off of the Kyrie matchup or the Luka matchup.
Yeah,
but I guess, and I'm sure with more time there'll be more things that stand out to me here. But is there anything else? that.
No, I mean, for me, like, it's probably a big reason why they won the Oklahoma City series, and it's going to be a big thing here. Like, look, you're going to put attention on Kyrie and PJ
Mhm.
Washington. I mean, on Kyrie and Luka Doncic. Like, Rudy is going to be, a big part of patrolling the interior. Like, it's like, how many shots do Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington hit? And if it's a lot, like PJ Washington did against Oklahoma City, like, how do you adjust then? Because that is the spot where, like, it'll be like cat and rotation and different stuff, and like you'll probably get good looks, but can you hit them at
Mhm.
target center? Like, what percentage do you knock those down at when somebody's undoubtedly rotating out towards you, but you probably get a look
Right.
off? Like, how those guys shoot the ball will determine how Minnesota can defend everything that Luka and Kyrie do as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a learn as you go series, I think. Whereas Phoenix and Denver were pretty like
Remember, was it Derek
cruising
Jones
bit.
Jr. that Minnesota had Rudy guard at times? Like he would set the screen, and then they would just
Yeah.
leave him in that game that they
Well,
lost, and then he hit shots. Like they were just leaving him. I think like Rudy would come off and like double off Luka's screen, and they would just leave. Like, I think it was Derek Jones Jr. just standing atop the 3-point line at the top of the arc, and then he would just knock down threes.
well, just looking at this box score. So that was no Lively in that game.
Yeah, that was
And
part of the small ball thing. So like that was what it
so
was. One game.
Powell
Yes.
started, played
Yep.
28 minutes,
Yep.
but he was the only center to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. That would mean in the game that the Wolves lost, which I guess to the extent that can be relevant, it's meaningful that they had 20 minutes of figuring out center without a center, which would have been Grant Williams. Okay, scratch that one off. Maybe that's
What was the date
PJ
of that game?
Washington, the 7th,
Okay.
January 7th. Yeah, 108, 115. The Wolves lost that one. So yeah, I and that's the thing is like you don't have to go small to use Derek Jones Jr. as the center either. You're just saying like the engaging Rudy's guy in it, and yeah, they probably will try if Rudy's going to play up at the level against Luka and really kind of almost blitz that.
Yep.
Then you leave the Wolves back line a little bit more susceptible, and I think that's where, I guess, to get in the weeds a little bit, like why I think when Rudy was up in the Denver series, it worked a lot of the time because Jaden was oftentimes back, right? He's on Michael Porter Jr. in the corner. So if Rudy's up guarding Aaron Gordon or playing up in coverage
Jaden's
with Ant on the ball, like Jaden's your rim protector. But if Jaden's on Luka and Rudy's coming up to set the screen, then you have both of you have Jaden and Rudy out 28 feet from the basket, 25 feet from the basket. And now what's there behind? And that's where Luka's, got that fucking laser, to the corner or to somebody cutting to the basket or drop, or if the big just slips out of that quick. Like this is going to be really, really different from a defensive standpoint, in just that like Phoenix heavy isolation team.
Denver just a 2-man game of
but like almost a different type of pick and roll sort of game. It's more like the angle DHOs and sort of stuff. Whereas what Luka's going to look like, man, it's just going to be high quad pick and rolls, and he's going to try and pick that apart. And the Wolves are going to need to kind of
and like
rely on that flying around it.
And flying around is awesome, but then like in rotation, when then Kyrie Irving is getting the ball in rotation, like it's one thing to fly around at like guys who just want to shoot, or guys who are non-shooters that kind of stop the whole thing. When it's fly around and now you are running out towards a Kyrie Irving who can play off the catch, like that gets a lot tougher.
Yeah, particularly if you're Cat or Naz Reid or something in that. Like here I am closing out on Kyrie Irving. Like that's
I can't let him take this open three, but then he's gonna blow by me and work.
So it's gonna, and it's a new type of challenge for the Wolves defense. But man, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker were too, and it doesn't seem like this as much like now because they really shut that off. Denver really was a challenge too, obviously with Jokic.
We're not saying they can't defend this, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they like made Dallas's life terrible. Just saying in the ways that it is different. Like this,
that's the thing. It's a new puzzle, and I think I'm glad we kind of talked through this. This is again, we're thinking about through this sort of live here of like this is a new defensive puzzle for this team to solve, and I think it's generally speaking, having watched them during the regular season, a harder puzzle for them to solve. Not that not that they don't have answers, but I think they maybe have a couple less options of what those answers might be. But that'll let's just wrap this up for today because we got to get over to practice. I do want to just note to everybody to be checking out Jace's stuff. I think, and I've said this when Jace is on. I think Jace is like really killing it with his postseason coverage here of, you know, taking the access that we have and getting like turning quotes into a real story and putting Jace's thought into it too. Obviously, we talked about the Inside the Halftime that saved the Timberwolves season article that he wrote after Game 7, but I'd really recommend checking those out. And I know everybody is like insatiable for Wolves content here. I think Jace is doing some of the best work, so check that out over at the Pioneer Press. You have anything else, Jace?
That's all, man. Let's get to practice.
Let's do it. All right. Until I think Wednesday morning, Chris Hine and I are going to go. Until then, he's Jace. You can follow him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. I'm Dane at Dane Moore NBA. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.